Okay, let's continue. So if we were asked to find how many of those inputs are even or odd, what would we do? Assuming we have the inputs being integers. Okay, well, we obviously need to follow a few steps, and they're quite straightforward. We create a variable to hold the even numbers count, and we create another variable to hold the odd numbers count, and then we simply loop through the array, and for every number we need to check to see if it's even or odd. If it's even, we add 1 to this variable here, the even number count, and if it's odd, we add 1 to the odd number count. And that's pretty much it. Rather straightforward. So that would look something like this. Create a variable. It has to be of type int, called evens, another one called odds, and then of course we simply write a check using a loop. Okay, if the value modulus 2 is 0, remember you've learned that this is how we check if a number is even. If this turns out to be true, then we simply add 1 to the evens variable. Otherwise, it must be odd, and so we add 1 to the odds variable. And if you remember from your high school math, an integer, right, an integer number can only be even or odd. It cannot be anything else. And so if you know it's even, then you know it can never be odd. Right? And if you know it's odd, then you know it can never be even. It's one or the other, never both. Okay, so this is rather straightforward. Let's go ahead and implement this. So let's head back over to Visual Studio Code. Okay. I assume that you would create a new folder. Okay, but I'm not going to do that. I will simply get rid of what I did in the previous video. Okay, and I'm going to keep this. However, for this example, I want to input ints. Okay, and I want the size to be maybe 4. Okay, so notice when I want to change the size of the array, all I have to do is make one change on line 5, and that's it. Right? And that's the beauty of creating variables, where everywhere you see that variable name, then the computer will substitute with 4. Okay, so always look for a way to make your program easy to change. Okay, if I did not do line 5, I would have to change this to 4. I would have to change this to 4. And I would have to change this to 4. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's 3 changes. Now, because I did line 5, I only need to make one change, and that's right here. Okay, so notice that pattern of changing your code. Okay, so this is our loop to get the input. All right, so we're finished with that. And so now what I want to do is to check how many of the inputs are even and how many are odd. Okay. All right, and as you can see, this is pretty straightforward. Again, I need a loop. Of course, I'm beginning at 0 this time. All right. Although technically, let me begin. All right, this is not right. The first thing I need to do is to actually create a variable, a box called evens. Okay, I'm going to set it to 0. And this is important. You must set it to 0. I'm going to create another one called odds, and I'm going to set it to 0 as well. Okay, so once you've done that, now we can loop through the array. Okay, all right, and so we're gonna say while I less than size, then of course I plus plus. And so inside the for loop, we're gonna simply check each item. So if the current item, okay, so numbers I, if it is even, right, so modulus 2 compared to 0. So if this turns out to be true, which means it's an even number, then I'm gonna take evens and add 1 to it. Okay, all right. Otherwise, I know that it must be an odd number, so I'm gonna add 1 to the odds variable, and that's it. A rather straightforward implementation. And so here I could see out, okay, even numbers, okay, evens, and then ENDL, okay, and then again see out odd numbers, odds, okay. Okay, let's test it out. Okay, so now I should be asked for only 4 numbers. All right, so 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so we have 2 even numbers, 12 and 14, and 2 odd numbers. And so if I want to run it again, okay, notice I only run it again, right? I don't need to recompile it because I did not make any change to my code. Okay, so let's put only odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7. Okay, 0 even numbers, 4 odd numbers. And if I try again with only even numbers, 4, 6, 8, 4 even numbers and 0 odd numbers. Okay, so that's how we would determine if how many of the inputs are even and how many are odd. Now I want to make one change. In C++ and in many programming languages, whenever you want to add 1 to a variable or to the value that is inside a variable, we tend to also do this. Okay, so we just say evens, name of the variable, and then you put a plus. Okay, so let me comment that out. Okay, so that's what we can do. Likewise, I could say odds plus plus. Okay, let me comment this out. All right, so I wanted to show you this syntax because you'll see it quite a lot. You have seen it here, obviously, and in class I have discussed it. We have discussed it, and so I will simply use it here, okay, and here. I want you to remember though, and that's why I'm going to leave this comment, evens plus plus is just a shorter way of saying whatever was in evens, add 1 to it. Okay, likewise, whatever was in odds, add 1 to that. Okay, so we're learning quite a lot when it comes to variables, and loops. So I encourage you to not only listen and look at what I am doing. I encourage you to code along. Watch the video, open up your Visual Studio Code or your online editor and just write the code as well, and test it, experiment, see how it works, right? Okay, so I will leave that there and I will see you in the next lesson.